We're 3 months into 2023, which is more than enough time for Atari to have sobered up from their 50th birthday celebration. Having just released an updated version of Akka Arrh from Llamasoft, many wondered what the future would hold for the Recharged series. And now, just a couple of weeks later, we finally know, thanks to the release of Caverns of Mars Recharged, an update of a 42-year-old shooter that wowed critics when it was first released on Atari's home computers. Will this be another throwback shoot-'em-up that the critics can't stop raving about? Or is it doomed to get lost in those dark and dangerous Martian tunnels? Find out now when I review Caverns of Mars Recharged. Originally released in 1981 on the Atari 8-bit family of home computers, Caverns of Mars was a vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up that was developed by Greg Christensen back when he was still a senior in high school. When most shooters of that era were either contained to a single screen or side-scrolling back and forth, this one saw your little spaceship dodging both enemies and rocks as it descended deep within the otherworldly tunnels. It was a fun little shooter that played well on home computers and received strong marks from critics. Now, 42 years after it first came out, Caverns of Mars is back. This recharged version takes the original premise and runs with it, enhancing the simple gameplay in some important ways. The concept is still the same. You fly a small ship down through a series of vertically scrolling tunnels, all while picking up power-ups, shooting down aliens, and being mindful of your fuel gauge. The big update here is that these Martian caverns are now destructible, allowing our little ship to shoot straight through all of the rocky terrain. There are a few other changes, of course. The ship in the original version of the game could fly pretty much anywhere, while the one here is locked in a single spot, only allowing you to move left and right to dodge. You'll also find that shooting your weapon in this recharged version will slow your ship down, which can be something that is incredibly helpful for dodging both enemies and rock formations. This is an interesting gameplay decision that not only sets this new version apart from the original game, but also for most other shooters in general. Beyond the gameplay tweaks, the arcade mode adds an extra layer of random fun to the action. Now, whenever you successfully survive a trip through the caverns, you'll be given the choice between 3 different modifiers. This can include the ability to enhance your life, add more fuel gauges, a protective bubble, or even equip a magnet that pulls the fuel right towards your ship. These modifiers will stack up over time, making each run feel somewhat different. And what's fun about all this is that the longer you go, the more you'll realize that sometimes your choices will work against you, making some of the later levels even harder and more challenging in unique ways. And much like all the other recent games in the Recharged series, Caverns of Mars adds a few optional wrinkles to the arcade mode that'll help you boost your score. For example, you can play where your ship only has 1 life, or where there are no upgrades or weapons. Those are a fun challenge, but I had such a good time with the standard mode that I doubt I'm going to be modifying the game like that anytime soon. Now, if you've been following my Recharged reviews over the last few years, then you've already heard me talk about how the bonus challenge missions are almost always the real reason to play one of these games. That is not the case when it comes to Caverns of Mars. For the first time, the mission mode feels like a big step backwards. It's not like past iterations where they'll give you a score to hit or a weird obstacle to overcome, because the goal in every Caverns of Mars mission is to simply survive to the end of the stage. That's it. The developer didn't even bother writing descriptions for the missions, a staple of the Recharged series. If you look closely, you can definitely see elements of the great challenge modes from previous games. You can tell that some of the missions are built around using specific weapons, while others will pit you up against a specific type of enemy or obstacle. It's also worth mentioning that a lot of these stages are genuinely challenging, much more so than what we get in the standard arcade mode. That's something that I actually like about the challenge missions, as it ups the difficulty for expert players. I just wish there was more variety to these missions and that the developer did more with this mode. It would be cool to see these missions completely shake up the formula, something that we saw in Centipede, Black Widow, and Breakout. Look, it's still a worthwhile addition, but the mission mode is a big step backwards. Honestly, this is a big reversal for me, somebody who would quickly get bored of the arcade mode and then exclusively haunt the challenge missions. For the first time in any of these recharged games, I found that I actually had a lot more fun trying to earn a high score in the arcade mode. There's just something about unlocking the modifiers, picking up the power-ups, and seeing the different level designs that kept me engaged. That's a fun gameplay loop that adds a layer of depth that you don't normally see in these recharged games. It actually feels like somebody really put some thought into how to improve Caverns of Mars while still honoring the spirit of the original. In that sense, they nailed it. Visually, this game has a lot in common with the other recharged games in both good ways and bad. While I like that the updated graphics still have a retro look, I just wish there was more variety to both the caverns and the backgrounds. Unfortunately, that's been a reoccurring complaint across this entire series of old school updates. This is a shooter with so many random elements, so it's disappointing to always have it look the same every time you start it up. Randomized backgrounds and more visual options would have gone a long way to give this update more of a personality. Of course, I've been banging that drum for a few years now, so this is nothing new. While some things never change, I was delighted to see that the action in Caverns of Mars feels completely different from what we're used to from the rest of the Recharged series. By shifting away from the single-screen shooters, the developers have been able to update the formula in some significant ways, leading to an all-around better game that has more depth than Missile Command, Asteroids, and pretty much every other Atari upgrade. Caverns of Mars is one of the better Recharged games. More than 40 years after it first hit home computers, Caverns of Mars is once again wowing critics. By moving away from single-screen action games, this recharged shoot-'em-up is able to try new things and set itself apart from most of Atari's upgrades. The usually consistent challenge mode is a bit disappointing, but don't worry, the single and multiplayer arcade mode is riotously fun and worth the price of admission all by itself. Between Akka Arrh and now Caverns of Mars Recharged, Atari hasn't lost a step after celebrating their 50th birthday. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now, here's the question I have for you. What has been your favorite Recharged game so far? You know, I've been thinking about ranking the retro upgrades at some point, but I'm not sure when. Maybe when they get to 10? I don't know. Let me hear your thoughts in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back tomorrow with more reviews, and then hopefully Sony will add a classic PlayStation game to their PS Plus lineup. Tune in later this week to see if that happens. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.